Our endocrine system is one of our other body systems that helps to maintain homeostasis. There are three main things that we think about when we think about our endocrine system. It responds to changes in the external and internal environment in order to help maintain homeostasis, which should sound a little familiar to you with respect to, we talked about this with the nervous system. The nervous system also helps to respond to changes in the environment in order to maintain homeostasis. So these two systems do work together. The endocrine system does help to coordinate with the nervous system to help maintain homeostasis through responding and regulating activities and life processes in our cells. The endocrine system uses glands located around the body in order to be able to release various chemicals to send signals. So what are those chemicals called? Those chemicals are called hormones. You've probably heard of hormones before, but maybe don't know enough detail about them. Hormones are produced by glands in our body. They're just specialized organs that actually have this ability to produce these chemicals. The hormones get secreted, released into the bloodstream via a duct, which is just a specialized tube. These hormones are considered to be chemical messengers. We've talked about messengers and messages and cells sending and receiving messages before, and in this case we're talking about them being chemical messengers being sent through the bloodstream. They send a signal from one set of cells to another in order to coordinate functions. So we may have one gland in the body releasing a hormone to send a signal to our cells to take up the blood sugar that's in the bloodstream in order to use it for energy. So it's sending a signal from that one set of cells, let's say our pancreas, sending it to another set of cells, let's say all of the cells in our body, to take up the glucose to coordinate our functions. It is specific to the target cells. So the hormones are very specific. We talked about this when we talked about enzymes being specific for their substrate. Hormones are the same way. They're very specific to the cells that they're meant to target or work on, and they're specific by using receptors. So if we look at this example that's drawn here, our circular molecules here are meant to represent the hormones. And we have two cells represented with their receptors located on the cell membrane, as we've seen before. In this case, the target cell is the only one that has the receptors that fit the shape of the hormones in order to receive the signal. This is so that the hormones can have a little bit more specificity, just like the enzymes did, so that they can target specific areas of the body or specific cells in the body for their function. Since hormones are secreted into the bloodstream, remember, since this works a little bit like the nervous system for regulation and coordination, it will be a little slower than the nervous system though, since the signal has to be sent through the bloodstream. It's not like an electrical signal like the nervous system uses that can get sent very quickly. So the endocrine system takes a little bit longer to act than the nervous system does. Let's talk about a couple of the glands that are used in the endocrine system. We have the hypothalamus, which is a major endocrine gland located in the central part of the brain. Some of you maybe have heard of the hypothalamus before. It has a few major roles. It regulates metabolism and food intake as well as body temperature. This is one that many of us tend to think of when it comes to the hypothalamus. The other thing that it does, which is a pretty major function, it stimulates or suppresses the pituitary gland. It can do this by releasing certain hormones that help to either turn on or turn off the signals from the pituitary gland. It may turn on a signal that tells the pituitary gland to release its own hormones. So it has a big regulatory function with the endocrine system as a whole. That brings us to the pituitary gland working with our hypothalamus. It's another major endocrine gland located beneath the hypothalamus in the brain, and it releases hormones that control other glands. So this is a gland that's not controlling or regulating functions in specific cells sometimes, but it's sometimes reflecting the ability to control another gland, telling it to either maybe release a particular hormone, stop producing a hormone, or something of that sort. The hormones that the pituitary gland produces include, but not limited to, growth hormone, which you can imagine what that does. It stimulates the growth of bone and tissue. So if you had a deficiency of growth hormone, you wouldn't necessarily be growing as tall or as big as you would normally expect to. We have people that get growth hormone injections in order to be able to grow a little taller than what they are on their own. Another one is called thyroid stimulating hormone, which is typically abbreviated TSH, and it stimulates the thyroid gland to produce hormones to regulate metabolism. So our thyroid stimulating hormone, in this case, is going to help us to regulate our metabolism, how quickly our body carries out chemical reactions. So sometimes you've heard of people having a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism. This is related to your thyroid gland and the thyroid stimulating hormone that comes from the pituitary gland. Luteinizing hormone and FSH are hormones that are used to control other sex hormones and to control reproductive systems. The next gland we just referenced before is the thyroid gland. I have a crude picture here drawn, which you don't have to sketch, but it's a picture of your thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped organ that sits in the front of your neck, near your vocal cords, near your voice box, and it helps to regulate metabolism. It assists in regulating bone growth as well, along with metabolism. It also helps to develop the brain and the nervous system. So if you are born with an underactive thyroid gland, you could have issues not only with your metabolism, you may be feeling quite tired, you may not necessarily have as much bone growth or bone deposition, you may also have issues with different developmental issues with your brain and your nervous system. The next gland are our adrenal glands. The adrenal glands, you can see a crude drawing here, are located on the top of each of your kidneys. And these adrenal glands produce two major hormones that we'll discuss. The first one are corticosteroids. The corticosteroids that it produces help us to produce the ability to maintain salt and water balance. So we have corticosteroids that help us to tell our body to get rid of extra salts, to get rid of extra water, conserve when needed, and so forth. The other hormone is typically called adrenaline. Sometimes we call it epinephrine, and it's used to help increase your heart rate and blood pressure during times of stress or during times of need, during times of fright. It's typically called our fight or flight hormone. If you're scared, let's say you were out in the wild and you were being chased by a lion, you'll notice that when you're very scared, your heart starts to beat really fast in your chest. You start breathing a little harder. That's the adrenaline working. Your body has released some adrenaline in order to increase your heart rate and blood pressure. We know from previous units that we need that in order to be able to deliver more oxygen to our cells, in order for them to be able to produce more ATP to carry out whatever reactions we need. In some cases, it might be to run away, so to give the energy to our muscles to help us run away from a predator. And that's why they called it the fight or flight hormone, because you would either have the energy to fight or flee away. We have three more glands to discuss. The first one is the pancreas. It's located near the stomach. If you look at this crude drawing here, it kind of sits sort of almost a little bit below and behind the stomach. It can produce digestive enzymes, but it also, during our endocrine function, releases two hormones called insulin and glucagon in order to regulate blood sugar. So somebody that has diabetes would have some issues with their pancreas in order to maybe not be able to regulate their blood sugar issues. We're going to talk about controlling our blood sugar and how that happens with feedback in another video. Our other two glands, these are our last two glands that we're going to discuss, are the ovaries and testes. And these we typically talk about, again, during reproduction, but they are endocrine glands, so we like to mention them here at least briefly. So the ovaries are the female gonads. A gonad is just a fancy word for a reproductive gland, and there are two of them. They produce estrogen and progesterone to help regulate the menstrual cycle, puberty, and gestation during pregnancy. We'll get into a little bit more detail about that during the reproductive system, though. The testes are the male gonads. Remember, those are just fancy names for reproductive organs, and there are two of those as well. Remember, most of our organs tend to be paired. The testes help to produce testosterone, thus the name, and that helps to regulate sperm production and puberty. A lot of times when we talk about the hormones between the ovaries and the testes, we talk about secondary sex characteristics that they produce. We'll get into that into a little bit more detail later on, but that's where the puberty comes from. That's it for our glands today.